Now Paul's storm, let's review. Jonah's storm was caused by his disobedience to the call of God. Jesus' storm was caused, he was the will of God. Paul was in the will of God and Paul had a storm. Jonah's storm was caused by his sin. Jesus' storm was natural, but we believe probably had spiritual components behind it. Now Paul's storm was different because Paul was caught in the consequences of someone's wrong decision. Let me speak about this for just a moment. Paul would have never been in that storm if the captain would have listened to Paul or used common sense. The captain made a decision that affected everyone on the boat and caused Paul not only to endure storm but almost lose his life. Now Paul was an experienced person because this was not his first storm, this was his fourth one. So Paul had a lot of his resume was full of storm survival this year. This year survived another storm. This year survived another storm. And then you flip the page like this year I got beaten this many times. This time I was left for dead. So Paul's resume was very colorful. But I want you to notice that he was caught in the consequences of other people's mistakes. How did he survive this storm? By persevering, swimming, and holding on to broken pieces. Let me give you 7 things that Paul did that you and I need to do when you're caught in the storm caused by someone's decision. There will be storms in our life that we will experience because somebody above us, our employer, our boss, could be a pastor, could be a parent, could be someone in your life that has decisions, because see, your decisions affect other people. And when people make decisions in the government, it affects businesses. When they shut down all the businesses and they said that your business was not essential, it affected people. People were thrown into a storm. This happens in governments, this happens in churches, this happens just overall. There are storms we experience, not because just the sinful nature all around us in sinful world, but because people in authority make decisions that affect other people. And sometimes we experience that. Number 1, forgive those who are responsible for the storm you're facing now. That's enough to close the service right now, and that will deliver a lot of us. Acts chapter 27 verse 21, Paul says, but after long abstinence from food, Paul stood up in the midst of them and said, "Men," I love this, you should have listened to me. "and not have sailed from Crete and incurred this disaster and loss." Paul addressed the sin in the room, the elephant in the room. You didn't listen to God. But what I want you to know is Paul never took it personally and became bitter or offended. Because the remaining of the story, as we're going to take a look, Paul actually helped everyone and saved everybody's life because of his commitment to God. If you're in a storm caused by someone, maybe your husband or your wife or somebody left you, maybe your children or your parents, maybe a boss kicked you out, a company got closed because of the government. As long as you're holding on to bitterness, you will drown in a storm. If you release that, it's not fair what they did. But you know what's also not fair? For you to relive that trauma every single day of your life. Forgiveness doesn't change the past, it enlarges your future. If you're gonna drink bitterness and unforgiveness, you are entitled to it. But please understand, as you hold on to bitterness, the devil holds on to you. Release yourself, loose yourself. God is the judge, not you. And then people will say, but I don't have any strength to forgive. Do not look within yourself to forgive them. Look to what your sin did to Jesus Christ. And you will find strength in there to forgive and to release. And God will turn your wounds into scars. And He will turn your scars into stars and make it a testimony for His glory. Come on somebody, give God some praise right now. Touch your neighbor and say, it's time to forgive. Touch your other neighbor and say, let it go. Let it go. Number 2, the storm might destroy your ship, but don't let it sink your faith. Come on, somebody needs to hear it in the back. The storm might destroy your ship. Don't let it sink your faith. Verse 22 of Acts 27. Paul says, and now I urge you to take heart. And look what he said. For there will be no loss of life among you, but only the ship. This is that storm where the ship didn't make it, but everyone on it did. I want to let you know, do not become too attached to your title, to your job, to your position. Why? Because ships tend to break. And God doesn't always promise to save your ship, but He promises to save your soul. And that's why Jesus prayed for Peter, and He says this, I prayed for you that your faith will not fail. The enemy is not after your ship, he's after to wreck your faith. The greatest loss is not when you lose your job or your business, it's when you lose your faith. The greatest loss, not even if you lose a friendship, it's when you lose your faith in God. And that's why Jesus prayed for Peter. He says, I prayed for you. He didn't say that you will not lose your faith. He didn't even pray for Peter not to fail. He says, I pray that you don't lose your faith. Paul says eventually to Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 1 verse 19, he says, having faith and a good conscience, which some have rejected concerning the faith, suffered a shipwreck. Maybe you are here today and your business got shipwrecked. Maybe because of what you went through in your family, your marriage got shipwrecked completely. Don't lose your faith if the storm claimed your ship. Hold on to God. And I want to speak for those who lost your faith. The storm didn't really claim your faith. It exposed the fact you had too much faith in your ship. Because faith in God is an anchor. It keeps me stable in a storm. Faith in God is not in my job. It's not even in my spouse. It's not even in my church. My faith in God is not faith in me. It's faith in Him. I know in whom I have believed, Paul said. Job said, he says, though He slay me, I know my Redeemer lives. See, all of these men lost their ships, but they didn't lose their faith. That's why the trial will purify your faith. But it cannot change your faith because your faith is not in you. It is in God. Come on somebody. If you still got your faith, test it and try it. Give God some praise.